Hello and welcome to the Kick in the Creatives podcast, hosted by myself, Sandra Busby, and my fellow creative Tara Roskell, offering you interviews, inspiration, motivation, and a gentle prod in the right direction. And for lots more information, challenges, and other useful tools to help you get creating, you can go to kickinthecreatives.com. And of course, this is where you can also find today's show notes. Enjoy the show. Welcome to today's episode, and today we're going to chat about how sometimes the smallest things can make a big difference to our art. But before we get onto that, thanks so much to everyone who's been sharing their work with us on social media for the challenges they've been doing. Keep them coming. We love seeing what you're doing. And also a huge thank you to our latest Ko-fi supporters. Your support shows that you like what we do and that you'd like us to continue. And we're going to thank you personally at the end of the show.
And finally, thanks to our sponsor Evolve. Evolve can teach you how to paint in a realism style to a professional level in a year or less, and for a fraction of the price of art school. Not only do they give you all the lessons and support online, but they also send you the materials you'll need. You can watch a free webinar from Evolve by going to kickinthecreatives.com/Evolve webinar. Or if you want to hear more about the Evolve program, you can go back and listen to episodes 67 and 73. Anyway, Sandra, what is new with you?
Well, okay, so my donut painting is well on the way. To tell you the truth, I haven't done a lot to it since we last spoke because we've just had a really, really, really busy time at work, and the day I would have probably used to paint, I actually was briefly talking to you about this before we started recording. I went forest bathing with my friend, which is a whole nother story. I won't go into that now. But yeah, so I haven't had a lot of chance to do that. And I think what I'm going to do is at the weekend, it's Paul's birthday weekend coming up as well. So that's another one. We've got people staying over. So it does make it harder to find time to fit things like this in. But yeah, I've literally probably got one main layer left and then the detail layer. So there's not a lot, to be honest. There's really not a lot to do on it. And quite frankly, it hasn't taken me long to do the bits I've done. It's just because I've been spreading it out such a lot that it's taken a few weeks. But it's looking good. So far, I'm really happy with it. So that's really good. And, you know, the last couple of podcasts I've been saying, you know, my sketchbook has really been calling me again.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it's funny because as you know, I went through about a year or two where I was sketching every day and really making a habit of it. And when I went through that art block, that's it. I just didn't do any at all. So totally got out of the habit of that. And anyway, I don't know if it was yesterday or this morning. I only saw it yesterday. No, it would have been yesterday if I saw it yesterday. So I got in my email inbox a amazing inspirational newsletter that came through from Kick in the Creatives and talking about the upcoming challenges for September. And basically I was like, oh my gosh, that could not have come at a better time. So the challenges coming up in September is Sketchathon September, which is to sketch every single day throughout September. So dusting off that dusty sketchbook and thinking, right, I'm going to do something every day. There's also, though, another quick kick challenge, which is the blind contour, which is like the 5-minute one. And you know, I've been talking about, I love doing blind contours. And there's also Scriptember where you can write fancy script. And I thought, you know what, that's like fate. You know, when you feel like something comes at just the right time. I was like, wow, that's brilliant. It was just literally quite a short newsletter saying, right, this is what we've got coming up. This is that. And I'm like, oh my God, that's exactly what I needed. So I thought, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do Sketchathon September, probably incorporate some blind contour. And who knows, maybe a bit of fancy script. So, yeah, that's what's new with me. I've been inspired by myself and you, or us, rather.
Well, I was going to say, people are going to think that's really weird if they think you're the one that sets the newsletter going, because they think, well, surely she knows that she'd set that newsletter going for today. And, of course, I set the newsletters going, don't I?
You
so
do.
you don't know when it's coming out.
No, but it plops into my inbox, and it just so happened that this one I was like, oh, wow, yeah. So that was brilliant timing, I thought, yeah.
Do you know, I haven't touched my sketchbook for ages, and we've actually got a week off next week. So I don't know if I will, but maybe I will actually do a bit of just mucking about. I don't know if I'm going to sketch things I see or whether just, doodling, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah, I think.
But apart from that, I haven't actually done that much drawing and painting because I've been really sort of busy trying to work on my website. And it's really funny because, we kind of joke and we talk and you say about, does your art have a story and all that? And I always say to you, I'm not that deep, don't I? Like really, kind of joking, but semi-serious as well. Yeah. Which is really funny because I keep hearing, you need to tell the story behind your art. You need to tell the story behind your art. It's like this ever-going record, isn't it? And I started looking at my characters and I realised that when I look at them, I can kind of conjure up a story behind them, if that makes sense.
So you conjure it up as in you think of one rather than you have one.
Yeah,
Good idea.
But it is, and that sounds really false and stupid, right? But what I mean is, when I'm painting them, I don't necessarily have a story because I don't know who they're going to be. Because it's quite intuitive when I paint, I might start with a reference, but it doesn't end up looking like a reference. So I don't know how this character is going to turn out. So I don't know who they are. And then as I was sitting there looking at the stuff on my website and I was thinking, I think she is I think she's royalty. So I think I know this sounds mad. I think she might be a sort of royal sort of queen or princess, but then she has an alter ego where she's a DJ in some interstellar futuristic club.
Only you could come up with a story like that.
I know. So I know it's completely bonkers.
Do you use mind mapping to come up with this, or is this just a natural thing for your brain?
It's natural. I just look at it and I think that's who you are. And it's like there's another one I've got who looks a bit like an alien. And I sat there looking at it and I think, what's the story? What's this creature's story? And I'm like, I know it's an alien, but people can't see it. It doesn't sort of really mean us any harm, and people only ever get a glimpse of it at midnight if it rains, and then you can just
that's so weird.
But what I've been doing, I know it's weird. I mean, I don't know if it is like making up a story after the thing, but I can look at them, and pretty immediately I can get a story.
Well, right? No, that is naturally coming from what you've done. Then that isn't you conjuring it up. That's you looking at them and seeing what it makes you feel like.
But it's what I feel like now. So it might not have been. It might be a year later than I painted it. I just haven't thought about it. But then I look at it. So I started doing this, and I've been using ChatGPT to help me write because it writes a lot more poetically than I do. So what I do is I go in there and I say, like I've just told you about the alien who appears at midnight, the rain at midnight and all that. And then I tell ChatGPT what it looks like. And then ChatGPT spits this thing out that's really over the top. But there's elements of it that I really like.
Yeah.
So how it writes it. So then I pick bits out and then I rewrite bits of it. And then I write bits in myself. And then I get it to check my grammar. And then I put it up.
Excellent.
I bet you think me using ChatGPT is cheating, don't you?
No, because I would if you were saying, give me a story about this piece of art, and then it came up with one for you. But if you're finding something and you're saying, right, my story is this, how do I write this in a better way? So no, I think there's ways of using ChatGPT, isn't there, to enhance something you already have in your head. I don't use it because, saying that, I think I was trying to use it once to make a TikTok bio, which is only 80 characters. And I was thinking, oh my God. And I had one already, but it was too long. So I kind of put something like, can I have ideas to write this in 80 characters or something like that? But it didn't come up with anything that was going to work for me. So I didn't bother.
Right.
I think maybe one or two words gave me an idea. So, yeah. But no, I don't think it's cheating. I think it depends how you use it.
There's one really interesting thing that I've discovered, and just in case nobody knows about, if you don't know about ChatGPT, it's an AI that can help you write things. And we've done an episode on AI before, so you can go back and look at that. But what I've noticed is it's helping teach me how to write.
Yeah.
Which may sound strange. Does that sound strange?
No.
Oh, well, yeah, because it comes up with something quite like poetic, the way it writes something. And then you think, I need to try phrasing things a little bit differently. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. See, I love doing that. And
you're better at it than me.
Yeah. Well, I think it's as well, if I use ChatGPT, it's like taking the fun out of that for me because I love doing that. I love writing, so I love coming up with these different, if I wanted to write a sentence and I thought, actually I could jazz that up a bit, I love that creativity about doing that. So that would take it away from me, whereas if you're not that way inclined, it can be an excellent tool, can't it?
Yeah, and I think it's really good because, like I say, I think it's teaching me so that I will start thinking more along those lines.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Does that mean I'm going to start getting texts that are more than one word? Like, yes.
No.
Or thanks.
Probably not. I'm going to start writing
I'm going to get these
poetically
poems
to you. Yeah. Poem about me having my dinner, aren't you? Just having my dinner.
The thing I think we first noticed when we started working on this podcast together, those years ago, was that I waffle on for England and I waffle on way too much. And you would the opposite, where you literally just say exactly what you needed to say and stop. And what we needed to do really was you needed to kind of elaborate a bit. And I needed to just stop talking so much. So I think over the years we've kind of we've learned from each other, haven't we? I think you're much better at elaborating, and now I don't waffle quite so much. So
it was the same when we used to write, wasn't it? Because I used to have to cut your writing in half.
Yeah.
Anyway, shall we kick off?
Yeah, I think so. Do you want to start, or do you want me to start?
You can start if you like.
Okay, so we're talking basically about how the smallest little things can make a huge difference when it comes to your artwork. So it's these tiny decisions which you might make by accident and then learn from it. There was a particular thing that I remember. I've spoken about this before and I thought, oh my gosh. And it was one of those things. It was such a small thing, but I couldn't believe what a big difference it made to my paintings from that moment onwards. And I think it took me to another level of painting in just that one accident. So I've spoken about this before, so I apologise if you've heard this, but
Sandra,
I do think it's...
Do you know, Sandra, you're waffling. What? You're waffling.
Am I waffling?
Yeah, get down to the actual topic.
Right. Okay,
I don't know what you're talking about yet.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, right. So basically I'm talking about hard and soft edges. Shall I go on?
Yeah, you can elaborate now you've told them what you're talking about.
Sorry, I was just demonstrating how you just said it.
You were just doing the big build-up to what the actual topic was going to be.
Oh, that's a terrible habit of mine. Okay, let's get on with it then. So basically, I was creating a series of teddy bears. This was way back when I very first started oil painting and trying to do the realism style. And I did these vintage teddy bears, and I think I'd done a couple of them. And funny enough, when I look back now at the first one, I didn't know what a soft edge was. Everything had like this quite a hard edge to it. Even if it was fluffy, it was still a definite edge. And then one day I was had some books in the background, and like really antique books. And as much as the painting, the trying to get the gold lettering and everything, I'd nailed that. I really had. And I'd nailed the textures and everything like this, but there was still something I could never put my finger on what it was that wasn't right. And one day I went to adjust something, and I accidentally put my hand, the side part, the fat part of my hand, on a piece of the painting, which I didn't realise was still very wet, actually. And when I took it off, I was like, the first thing I did was swear. I was like, oh, bleep.
Yeah.
And then I stood back and thought, oh, God, I'm going to sort that out now. That edge is totally gone. And I went to get my fan brush to try and, blur the background out so I could start that bit again. When I did, I thought, oh my gosh, I can't even believe that. It looks amazing. What it was is the books were in a very dark background, and the bear was in the foreground. And where I had sort of lost that edge of the book, it looked like the light just wasn't hitting, so it was blending into the background, the dark background. And I thought, that's exactly what really is in front of me in my, because I had it all set up in my shadow box. But you see, again, that was a stage where I hadn't quite learnt about, painting what I see, which I'll go on to. So basically, that was the moment I learnt about hard and soft edges, and also lost edges. That's when sometimes you'll look at something and the tonal value of what you're looking at, the edge of that object, is the same tonal value as the object or the background which is directly next to it. In which case, then you don't have to put an edge at all. They blend into each other. So that was probably the biggest aha moment for me of my whole painting career, if you want to call it a career. Do you know what I mean? Painting journey, adventure, or whatever. It was the difference between me making good paintings and making bad paintings. So that was a massive moment for me. And it was literally the smallest thing to learn. And actually, that is why you should go to that Evolve webinar that Tara spoke about at the very beginning, because that teaches you about hard and soft edges and lost edges. And honestly, it's the best lesson I think I've ever learned when it comes to painting. So just quickly, obviously, I want to go on now because that links nicely into drawing what you see, not what you think you see. Well, of course, as far as I was concerned, I was painting books at the time, and books have a straight edge, don't they? They have a long straight edge, with a ruffled, maybe they're a bit battered and old, so they have a ruffled bit there and whatever. However, do they? Because what I should have been doing is not assuming, this bit is straight down with a few wonky bits because it's an old book. What I needed to be doing was looking carefully at the book and thinking, you can't even see that edge, actually. I can't see it. It's kind of like melting into the background. Okay, so what I needed to be doing is sort of smudging that in and blending it into the background and losing it. That is drawing what you see, or painting what you see, and not painting what you think you know. And it's, let's say, for another example, you're drawing an eye. This is a classic example. You say to somebody, okay, look at my face and draw my eye. Now, a novice, somebody who's not experienced at drawing, and even some people who are sort of experienced in drawing, but they haven't really got how to get good at it yet. What they'll do is they'll think, right, okay, it's an eye, it's an almond shape, so they draw an almond shape, and then they draw a round circle within the almond shape, and then they'll draw another round circle for the pupil, and then they'll draw eyelashes coming straight out the top. Whereas really, what they need to be doing is thinking, okay, well, that eye actually isn't almond shaped because this eye has like a hooded part of the lid sort of falling over the top of it, which makes it sort of slightly baggy in that area. And then, and the eyelashes, they actually grow downwards before they curl upwards. And, those eyebrows aren't all going the same way. Some are sort of sticking up a bit and some are, tiny fine ones, and it's looking, and the iris, it's not a round circle because some of that is actually hidden behind the lid, and it's taking notes and observing what you're looking at really carefully that makes the biggest difference to your drawings. So yeah, they're two tiny things: hard and lost and hard and soft edges, drawing what you see instead of what you think you know. It's such a small thing to do and a really easy thing to do. But unless you know that and you practice that, you'll never, you'll hold yourself back. It can make a big, big difference. I finished.
Yeah.
Well, are you still there? Did you go make yourself a cup? Did you go make yourself a cup of tea?
I did, yeah. But if I was drawing you, you'd obviously have one large eye and one squinty one. So
yeah, you would.
All that
I'd
would
be
not
having one
apply.
It'd be sticking out the side of my head.
Yeah, I was.
You'd have to look at Tara's. You'd have to look at Tara's work to know what I'm on about there. What we're on about.
Yeah. But I was watching Portrait Artist of the Year, and because I knew we were doing this episode this week, and it was one from a while back, but they had kids. It was a celebrity one, but they had children in there who were also drawing the the people, the sitters, and the kids. It was really funny to watch them because they were doing that exact thing with the eye that you just said. They drew the almond eye because someone had obviously told them, or they'd obviously got into this habit of the symbol. Because basically you're symbolising things, aren't you?
That's exactly what you do as a tree. It's a bit like a cloud, isn't it? The classic tree shape as well, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Funny, isn't it?
Yeah.
But one of the things, and I'm going to get straight to the point of what I'm talking about, is the rule of thirds. Now, I don't know all the composition rules. I know there's one with a weavy snail. I have no idea what that one's called. Do you know what that one's called?
No.
The weavy snail composition one. We obviously sound very highly educated.
About, but yeah, I can kind of see where you're getting at, but I don't know what it's called.
But to me, the big one is the rule of thirds. I don't know about you. And once you learn this, it can just make such a difference. And I think one of the early times I knew about this was a teacher at school. And to be honest, he wasn't a very good art teacher in most ways. But he once pointed out on a painting I'd done, it was when I was on holiday. And so I think I'd drawn a sketch from life and then I'd painted it. But I'd done the sea kind of at, I think, either 50% higher. I'd done it in the top third.
Right, yeah.
Which sounds fine. You think, okay, that's good, rule of thirds. But actually, he started teaching me about it. But it meant that I would have had to have been up on a cliff drawing this the way I'd done it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not strictly the rules. The rule of thirds is more about where you place something. So you know that if you place something on a third, it's generally going to look good, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think
so what you do is you divide your painting into,
9.
into 9, don't you? And then the best place to put your focal points is really where any of those thirds join, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And I've done it before with faces. Quite often my faces are just central, and there's nothing wrong with doing things centrally.
No.
But if you can hit an eye on a third even, it works quite well. But also you can push, whereas you think, it's going to look weird if I push a face over to one side. As long as you have an element to balance it, if you kind of place the face so almost the nose is over a third, if it works well, you can make that work as well, can't you? And I wonder what it is that's so pleasing to the eye about that.
I don't know, but it's so true in so many elements of life. And it's so funny because, so for instance, if, say, Paul were to do the housework and he were to wipe the windowsills down, and then he'd put the plant pot back. And this is typical of the same if my kids did it as well. What they would do is they would put the plant right in the middle, in the centre of the windowsill. And then I'd straight away see that and think, oh my God, what's that doing there? That's awful. And I'd put it a third along the windowsill, because that is what works. Symmetry seemed to be a thing we did, I don't know, back in the 70s and 80s, I guess. But actually, it doesn't really work if you put a plant bang in the middle of it. There's something not right about it. Move it over a third and then put something small next to it. It's a much more balancing, pleasing. But like you say, I don't know why. I don't know why. Is.
But I mean, the good thing about it now is if you've got a phone with a camera on, majority of them will have the thirds in. So you can use it
like a grid.
Experiment with, a grid thing. But that is really good because you can use that to experiment. If you're working from life, you can obviously use that as a viewfinder.
Yeah.
And kind of, obviously it will distort it a bit, but you can say, oh, okay, if I made that and I put that tree that's in the foreground, if I put that on a third, then I can get a nice composition in the background. And I think that works really well.
As a general rule of thumb, you see, in my paintings, I will avoid at all costs anything happening in the very centre of the painting. So I'll visually and in my mind, I'll mark a spot that I think that's the middle of the canvas. I don't want anything to be going on there. I don't want anything to be meeting at that point. I don't want anything actually going on at that point. And now there's one or two paintings that might have happened, but it's not the end of the world. But generally speaking, try and avoid anything happening, meeting, or any focal points being dead centre.
Oh, right. Well, I'm just looking at some of my faces now, and this isn't even necessarily deliberate, but because I have the one big eye, even though I quite often have a face centred, so that, the nose will be fairly near the centre.
Yeah.
The big eye will definitely be on the third, or near the third. Yeah. Strange.
And you don't want a horizon line like you say about the sea. You don't really want that in the centre or anything like that, because that's just almost slicing your painting in half. And I've seen paintings before where you've got a tree dead central in the middle of or maybe the focal biggest tree in the centre of a painting.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh God, that's really bad. It's sort of basically dividing it in half. But if a beginner's eye won't necessarily see that, and they won't realise how weird and wrong that looks. It's something you kind of learn over time. So these are quite good things to know early. The earlier you know these things, the quicker you'll get on, won't you?
Yeah,
but
I think the thing that my teacher was trying to tell me was that when you have the thirds, you want to have because it was the beach and the sea, and you want to use those thirds, but where you put the thirds does make a difference to where your viewpoint would have been, doesn't it? So if you put a high third is where the horizon is, that is like if you were up somewhere high and looking down.
Yeah.
Whereas if it really, all I'd done, the horizon should have been on the bottom third because I was standing down there on the beach.
Yeah, that's sort of about perspective, isn't it?
Yeah, it's perspective, but it was still using the rule of thirds as well for where, all mixed in at once.
I mean, people say the importance of learning perspective, which I do agree with to a point, but I think actually, as long as you look, if you're looking and you're observing and you're drawing, like I say, you're drawing what you see and not what you think you see, you can't really go wrong with perspective. You don't even have to learn too much about it. But things like that, you are right. If you're standing up really high, then perspective is going to change quite a lot,
Yeah, I mean, I've done loads of lessons in perspective. I remember when I was at school and I did technical drawing for a bit, which was horrendous. But
it's so boring, isn't it? Perspective.
Oh my God, so boring. And also it's like, oh my God, how the heck can I work out if I've got something and then it goes around the corner and then it's going down a hill and do you know what I mean? It's like, it's far better just to look.
Yeah, exactly that. Exactly that. And you kind of learn it on the way as long as you're looking. You kind of start to notice these things, you know. And then
Or
you
draw
do
faces,
learn.
and then you don't have to do perspective, then do you so much?
Yeah. But you know what you're saying
Just avoid
about
it.
You know what you're saying about the rule of thirds. So
Yes.
So for instance, right, if you squint and you're looking at your piece, you'll notice that there's lights and darks. And quite often when your eyes are wide open, you're just staring at something, you're more involved in the colour than you're forgetting about the tone. It's really, really, really important to understand that the tone is probably more important than the colour. So for instance, you could do a landscape and you could do a landscape all in purples and yellows. You can make that look absolutely right because as long as you're doing it tonally, it still would work. But if you do your landscape in greens and blues as the classic, but you get the tonal values wrong, it'll look all wrong. But again, what you need to be doing as well is making sure you've got a pattern of lights and darks. So one way to do this is to say, for instance, you upload your painting to a computer and you turn it to black and white. That's one really good way of realising whether or not your painting's working. If you turn it to grayscale, and tonally there is not enough contrast between your foreground and your background or your objects where there should be contrast, then it's not going to work. Even if you look at it without being black and white and you sort of think it's not working because the contrast is all wrong. And ideally, going back to your rule of thirds, you want a nice pattern of lights and darks. You don't want it to be heavily dark on one side and then hardly any dark the other. There needs to be a balance between lights and darks throughout the painting. I know that you often get a lighter side and a darker side because obviously it depends which way the sun or the light is shining, but you still need to have a balance that somehow, because there's still always going to be darks in one area even if you don't sort of immediately see that. So that's another thing, going back to, it's a kind of, I suppose it's like a balance, isn't it? It's just creating a nice balance.
Shall I tell you another one?
Yeah.
This for me was a really big thing, and that is balancing colours, which sounds really weird. But when you suddenly get this, it's like, wow. And what it is if you've got a painting, say, and you decide that, okay, my eye, I'm going to put a bit of blue around the eye. Don't just put a bit of blue around the eye. You now need to put a bit of blue somewhere else, probably the opposite side, to balance that blue. And not only does it mean you've kind of formed that balance, like that seesaw, there's something going on both sides, but it also brings a harmony, doesn't it, if you haven't got too many colours going on in that piece. But it is such a... You don't think about that, do you, until you've been doing art for a little while, to me.
When you go around a gallery, and you can sometimes you can often see this, even going back to when the old masters painted, if there's a little bit of red somewhere, even if it wouldn't immediately think that should be there, there'll be a little bit of red the other side of the painting somewhere, even if it's just a few dots within the leaves of a tree, and that's how they balance that painting. Because if you just have a splash of red somewhere and it's nowhere else in the painting, it's almost like your eyes are so focused on that, they can't travel around.
Yeah. I've seen novices post paintings and they go, there's something wrong with this. And you look at it and you think, it's because they've got a load of green one side and then there's nothing the other. And they just need, you can actually start to see it, can't you? You can see it in someone else's work where they need to put a bit of colour. It's so odd. But I think that is something that once you know it, you start looking for it. But it's something that grows over time, I think, knowing where to put that colour.
But also you can tell the people that have only just learnt it, because quite often they'll overdo it. It's something that's very subtle. You don't have to think, oh, well, I need a big blob of paint there that's that colour because I've got some up in that corner. It can be the most subtle thing. Yeah. It has to be subtle, really, but for it to work properly. But carrying on with the colour theme, basic colour theory, I remember thinking I could skip that because I like perspective. I thought that was the most boring thing in the entire universe, was doing colour theory. And then there was one day and I thought, no, I every time I mix a colour, it looks like mud. And so back then we had DVD players, and I bought a colour theory DVD, and it was so boring.
God, that sounds like I laughed.
It was boring as boring could be, but I had to make myself learn that because you can't. It's not like perspective where if you look at it for long enough, you'll get it. If you're looking at a colour, you need to think, okay, why does that colour look so fresh and vibrant, even though she's mixed this colour and that colour together? Because sometimes you'll mix two cadmium colours are the real culprit for this. They tend to, if you mix cadmiums, they quite often will make mud, so yeah, it's fine to use a cadmium, but then you need to use it with something transparent to create a lovely vibrant wash. Do you know what I mean? But it's learning. You have to learn basic colour theory to be able to understand that. And also colour balance, like we were talking about before. Okay, so if you say, for instance, you look at your colour wheel and you've got purple one side and yellow the other. That's a great thing.
Have you said that because of me? The purple and yellow.
Oh, well, let's go with orange. Let's go with orange and blue then. Let's go with orange and blue. So, yeah, I mean, they are... they're opposites on the colour wheel, and they look so fantastic together because they're opposites, but also harmonising as well. So you might have, yellows and oranges and reds. They look beautiful together. But at the same time, you also need to mix cool and warm. And the thing is, it's not something I can teach you on this podcast because it's a big in-depth thing, isn't it? But taking that time to learn this stuff, colour harmony, colour complementaries, colour balance, warms and cools, all of those things make the difference between an obvious beginner artist and someone who really knows what they're doing, or a brilliant painting and a painting that could be good, but there's something wrong with it.
Yeah, and I think this is more if you're painting towards realism, isn't it? I'd say it matters more.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, even in your paintings.
Yeah, I use complements.
Colour balance.
I definitely use balance, and I use, but I don't mix. I don't mix colours like you do.
No, you don't mix, but you use different colours on your canvas, and
yes.
You wouldn't just use all purples and blues. You'd think, oh my goodness, this is going to need a yellow somewhere or an orange or something to balance that out.
Yeah, well, like I said, I have a bit of a thing for yellow and purple. I kept on doing shadows really purple, didn't I, for a bit?
Yeah, I remember we had Danny Gregory on, didn't we? And you did a sketch of him. He had a purple moustache.
Oh dear.
But it's things you wouldn't do that now because you learnt from that, didn't you? But
I probably still would, because I still like giving a real punch to colours. So I probably would. Yeah. But it would be...
I think next time, if we had him on again, you'd have to do him in your style.
Oh, God, with a squinty eye and a big eye. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe. Shall I give you another one? And this is using better materials. Now, this doesn't always apply, but it does sometimes, especially with things like watercolour. If you want to use watercolour, definitely buy some reasonable watercolour paper. It doesn't have to be mega expensive, just has to be of a reasonable thickness or weight, and texture really makes a difference depending what kind of look you're going through as well. So I would experiment with those. But I can still remember as a kid, a teenager, starting to try and learn how to use watercolours. And obviously my parents weren't painters, so they didn't really know, and you didn't have the internet then. And I remember trying to do watercolours on cartridge paper, and you're like wondering, why won't this work? And however many paintings you try and paint, it looks rubbish, and you just think it's you, because you think, well, it's because I'm a beginner, so it's going to be rubbish. But there is a thing where certain things like that, they will make a big difference. So if you carry on using cartridge paper, you'll get a bit better, but you're never going to know if it's you that's rubbish or if it's just the paper.
Yeah. And in fact, even some watercolour papers, again, I mean, I remember buying a watercolour sketchbook from W.H. Smith, and what was like, it was awful. Absolutely awful. Really, really bad, yeah.
The works
It was only
awful
cheap. It was just one of those, yeah, and it's like, oh, but, you know, I'm using watercolour. It was hideous. I'm not saying they don't do a decent one as well, but this one I bought was rubbish. And, yeah, so it's very true. It'd be, even with watercolour though, yeah, try if you're gonna invest your time into something. Obviously, when you're learning, you know, I would say it's different when you're learning, but actually in this case, I don't think it is, because
it's not. No,
it can almost hold you back. Because, like you say, you don't know if it's you doing it wrong or the materials. So just invest that. If you could invest in anything, paper is the one thing I would say is worth spending that extra bit of money on, because you really don't. You're never going to create a great painting on crappy paper,
and you're not going to learn either, because it just doesn't handle the way it should. Watercolour on something like cartridge paper, unless it's it'd have to be really, really heavyweight to even stand anything, because as soon as you lay colour down, well, first of all, it doesn't spread the same as it would on a watercolour paper. And then also you get the pits, don't you? It just rippling.
You get these horrible cauliflower marks, which is great if that's what you're going for and you're embracing those, but with a cartridge paper you'll get a lot of that.
Yeah, it's just hideous. Do you know of any other materials where you would definitely say it makes a difference? I mean, obviously everything makes a difference, but, you know.
I mean, I can see say you can get student quality paints and watercolours. Well, that's fine. I mean, it is okay to use the student quality watercolours and oils to begin with when you're learning. But what I would say is don't go and get student quality watercolour from W.H. Smith. You can, but get a brand name. So go for the Winsor & Newton or whatever, but go for their student quality. Don't go for the work's own make basic watercolour. Do you know what I mean? Don't do that. So that sort of thing I think is fine. What was your question?
I just wondered.
Can't remember what I'm talking about.
I do love, because I've never really used artist quality watercolour paints. I've always used student, but because I don't do it that much basically. But I did invest in some white knights, and I don't even know if you can get them now because they're Russian, and I know there's loads of things we can't get now from Russia. Yeah. But they were bloody brilliant. The difference between those white knight paints and say like a Winsor & Newton student thing, oh my God. Yeah. The amount of pigment that came out of them. But my question to you really was, are there any other materials that you can think of that really made a difference? As in, you tried something and it was cheap and then you swapped to something better?
Yeah. Canvas.
Canvas, yeah.
Canvas. So working on cheap canvas, it's fine if you're really, really beginning and learning. But if you're, so you can get these canvas boards, these canvas sketch boards. They're handy if you're going out and doing like a landscape and things like that. But they've got this, and this is fine actually. If you're somebody who's doing a landscape or where you're embracing that thick paint and impasto marks, great, it's fine. The rougher, the better. But actually, when it comes to choosing my canvas, I really now can tell when it's a cheap canvas and when it's not. It's they're usually quite rough and they're horrible. The sides of them are horrible and they buckle, as in like they're not drum tight. I know there are ways around that, but actually going for a good quality canvas, I find makes a very big difference to my paintings and how they turn out, because it's like anything, isn't it? Drawing on a bit of paper that you just steal out of your printer, for at work, as opposed to drawing on a proper piece of nice quality paper.
Yeah,
they do all make a difference. like I say, when you're learning, there's certain things doesn't really matter. I mean, the canvas, like I say, it doesn't really matter, but there will come a point where you're like, actually, no, this is really making a difference for me. Using something that, investing that bit more money into it is actually making, my painting look a lot more like I expected it to look.
Yeah. You could use linen canvas, don't you?
I like the linen ones, yeah.
Are they? No, because what bugs me about canvas is I really like a smooth surface. And obviously, canvases have that kind of woven texture. Does linen?
Mine don't.
Linen doesn't have that.
Well, no, I just go for a fine texture,
Right.
or you can get super fine as
Right.
well. I use, there's a company called Bell Art, and they do some lovely extra fine canvas weaves.
Yeah.
And it's like you can't feel it and you can't really see it. Of course, when I'm painting glass, I don't want that weave in it. I want a super fine surface. It is more expensive, but I actually sent off, and I think I got this from Jackson Art. I sent off it. I can't remember how much it cost. It did cost me some money. I can't remember how much, but it was a book of canvas like samples. And I don't know if it was just a Bell Art one or if it was a general all-round one, but it's then I've got this book so I could touch and feel each one and think, oh no, this is what I want, this is what I'm looking for. And so that was worth having, because I probably would have gone through about 15 canvases I didn't like before I'd have finally settled on the one I like. Whereas if I literally spent one bit of money on this booklet and I knew straight away what I was going to like.
You sounded like when you were talking about going through it, it's like I could just imagine you going, oh. And licking the blooming canvas. And she'd, I like that when you're stroking this canvas thing.
Some weird things. You have some weird visual things going on in your head.
I don't want to picture you licking canvas. I think it's your turn.
Okay, so before we go on, I'm editing the podcast and I've realised that we've reached 47 minutes and we still have about the same amount to go. So rather than put you through Tara and I yapping on together for another 47 minutes, I thought, you know what, let's split this episode into two. So we're going to leave it here for now and we are going to pick up where we left off next time. See you then. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you did, perhaps you'd like to share it and leave a review for us on iTunes.